Oh, right. Okay. That's
Well, there we are.
Yeah, that's
sadly. Hopefully, she'll get better, as I said.
Well, blooming hell, I need Sandra back because I like taking the mickey out of her.
But well, the best beauty of it is she takes the mickey out of you because she quite often knows more than you. You quite often you're explaining a place and she's been there and seen it.
Yep. Yeah. Can I just say something, Pete? You really put me in my place, haven't you? Without saying much more. Right. Okay. We'll just do a little bit of a round quickly. So, anything, Gina? Is there anything you want to say?
No, not this week.
Well, you know, you're a bit quiet these days. I think you're a bit dodgy. I think really because you know you're not telling us everything, are you? You know, you're not going into all the details of your life with a certain top class actor.
No.
No, all right then. Right, talking about top class actors, Anne, you're a bit of an actress, you are. So, any news you want to tell us this week?
Not really. I'm doing a lot of reading which involves archaeology, but it's not really anything new. I'm just finding it very interesting.
Okay, that's good. What about Margaret? You annoying woman! Oh, she's not with us this week. She's gone somewhere else. Even though she could have taken her computer with her, but no, she can be bothered to listen to this. Don't worry, I'll get my revenge back next week. Roger ain't with us. I don't know why. He's probably off somewhere with that woman he's with. Andy, anything you want to tell us?
Only that, you know, that thing we did at Jenny Brown's Point.
Yeah.
Round at just beyond Silverdale there. Well, Karen was down there walking the other day, and one of the reasons it was done was because of danger of erosion. The tide has taken virtually all the turf off that archaeology now, so all that would have been lost if we hadn't been there. So we're going to have to go and have a look at it and see if we can secure it a bit better again, but it's taken it all away in those storms. So.
Oh, right. Okay. And we're talking about what date is the site Mesolithic, is it? Or what is it?
No, it's sort of 1700s, earliest bit of it.
Okay, fair.
Industrial archaeology, really. So.
Okay, no, it's as good as important as anything else.
Yeah, it's a really interesting site. So. Lot of changes over a very short period of time, which is unusual for industrial stuff. So.
Yeah. I was, I you know, for anyone that doesn't know, you all know that I do a class on a Wednesday at 6 o'clock, and you can always join us, but it's got very in depth now, and we do dowsing and lines and understanding the context of changing space and looking at things from a non-ceremonial and ritualistic and archaeological aspect. So if anyone's ever interested in that, then you know, that does continue. And my mind is sort of still in that tonight. So if I go off on a tangent, you know why. So right. Okay. Who else have we got? Claire, do you want to tell us anything? Have you been on your broomstick anywhere recently? No, it's all good.
She's on mute.
No, she said no. That's proof. That is proof. She said no. Therefore, that is proof that she does fly places on a broomstick. You see what I did then?
I was born on midnight. What do you expect?
Well, that's true. That's true. You only work at night, didn't you? That's a giveaway, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah.
Can I just mention something? You know the store that you work at. People have been going missing at 12 o'clock at night on a regular basis.
Well, if you came here, you would think it was the land of the living dead.
Yeah, well, yeah, I'm not saying anything. Right, okay. Okay, who else have we got left now? We got anyway, thanks for that. Finally, Pat, have you got anything you want to say?
No, I've been sitting here racking my brain, trying to go up. I'll turn on my video. Right? Yeah, I can't. I watched something on Egypt, you know, on King Tut and the natives. I don't know, and I can't. Well, I just don't know what to. I haven't got it together in my mind to tell you about it, but it was impressive. If anyone else saw anything on the King Tut and all that. They built a new museum down there. You're
Nice.
all his stuff in, so it's
That's
quite
nice.
yeah.
That's Talking about that, we went off a bit of a tangent on Thursday. Actually, my Thursday morning class, we did like a whole hour looking at an archaeological find in Spain, right? And by the way, somebody's online. They've already said hello there. Do you ever visit Brazil? Yes, we do stuff in Brazil. So keep watching. Anyway, so basically, somebody said, oh look, there's this thing being found in Spain, and I got the wrong article, and it turned out that that they found these rock crystal daggers and rock crystal arrowheads and all the rest of it. And they were explaining in the article that this is really rare and it's the only place that they've ever been found. And this proves that there's a king buried here. And then you look at the amount of artifacts found there and you're thinking, hang on a minute, this might be one of many tombs with all these rock crystal arrowheads. It was really intriguing. And because what we were going to look at was a find in Spain that involved inner ear operations 5,000 years ago, which actually succeeded in relieving pressure with both eardrums because it actually healed. It was great. And then also last week, I think you already know this, that they found that beautiful Roman mosaic in London.
Mm.
I think that was actually made on Wednesday night, but that was I think I may have mentioned this last week. I really went overboard and I was just like really enthusiastic. So we recorded that. It was great. Anyway, yeah. So there's been a lot happening, and so what I'd like to do. This is today. I wasn't expecting to actually be teaching this today at all, and because I didn't think we were going to actually get any reception. So we're going to crack on. And one of the things I'm going to start off with, we'll be looking at briefly, sort of before or after the break, Flatum. And we've heard a lot about Flatum anyway. But I wanted to look at Steepholm, Lundy, Denny Island. And then after the break, we'll be taking a little look at some other islands in the Bristol Channel. And it's actually to give you more of an overall perspective on what the meaning of these islands to prehistoric people actually were. Because when you look at these islands today, they're islands. Back in the past, they would have been mountains. Back in the past, they would have been huge hillocks within an endless plain, particularly 12,000 years ago, which was very frozen and endless tundra, which will be a theme that we'll be looking at a little bit today. And I will warn you, if the recording starts to get a bit crackly and all the rest of it, then this is why I'm getting into it now. So I'd like to take a little look at Steepholm, which should be quite appropriate to see first. And for those that don't know where the Bristol Channel is, it's that bit between Wales and France. Nah, I'm kidding with you. That bit between Wales and England, which is the area that we're talking about, is immediately north of Minehead and Devon, and it's those little islands in between. So we look at Denny Island, a little unknown island that I really get fascinated with. And I think I may have given a 2-hour talk on Denny Island once. I don't know how, because there's very little written about it, but we'll look at Lundy as well. We've got a little bit of stuff from Lundy, which outclasses the stuff that we get from Steepholm and Flatum, and probably introduce only the prehistoric stuff that Pete might want to say about Flatum and nothing more. Because if we do let Pete go on about Flatum, we may as well forget it. It'll go on all night. Anyway, sorry, Pete, I'm having a go. So, oh, by the way, tomorrow we'll be on the Wednesday slot between 6 and 7 o'clock. We'll be looking at certain crosses which have endless crosses in them, and the sense of the line and the sense of the continuity, or in Pete's own words, the Celtic cross. So that's what we'll be looking at 6 o'clock tomorrow. So if anyone's interested in joining that, they need to let me know in the break or whatever. So let's look at Steepholm, and we're just gonna be very wary and just make sure that we step gingerly today. So everything flows quite nicely. Everything's working around me, which is great, including power, internet connection. So we're gonna look here, and as I go through the images today, we're gonna delete them because just in case we don't have enough bandwidth. There's Steepholm, a rock in the Bristol Channel. When we think about the Bristol Channel, we forget about Lundy Island, even though it's classed as being in the Bristol Channel, and we forget about another island known as Denny Island. So typically, we've got 2 islands that does not need much introduction. Steep Island being this big sort of faggoted rock in the Bristol Channel, and the other one being a flat pancake in the form of Flatum, which is quite a good description, actually.
They're Carboniferous limestone outcrops of the Mendip Hills.
Oh, for God's sake, Pete, shut up. I was just about to say that. Thanks, Pete. These Carboniferous limestone rocks created 350 million years ago are the carpet pebbles of rock that you see as islands in the Bristol Channel today. And to give you a little idea where everything is, let's chuck that one in. So what you clearly see is Steepholm. If we zoom in a little bit there, we can see Steepholm there, Flatum, in relation to Lundy. And the little island that I say as Denny Island is a little bit further north towards the new Severn Bridge, or the Prince Charles Bridge, as it's called. The one thing about the Bristol Channel and these islands 12,000 years ago is that from approximately the edge of the screen all the way through into the Bristol and all that, from the left-hand side all the way through, that was basically land 12,000 years ago. So you can imagine that maybe if you stood where that L is on Channel, you will have seen this huge rock in the distance of Steepholm, and inevitably you would have seen the rock of Flatum as well. It wasn't until about 11,000 years ago that we actually start to see the likes of Steepholm and Flatum actually being colonized by trees. In fact, the archaeology of the Bristol Channel tells us that between 11 and 10,000 years ago, the landscape from France, stretching all the way across to the English Channel, all the way into the south, into Somerset and Devon and so on, all the way over to Glamorgan, that itself was carpeted with trees between 11 and 10,000 years ago. But if you want to go back 12,000 years ago again, as we started, these rocks would stand out as great big thimbles within the landscape and could be seen for miles around. But then the landscape became carpeted with trees about between 11 and 10,000 years ago, which simply meant that you wouldn't have been able to see Steepholm and Flatum because you'd have been underneath the blanket of trees that once existed. And we know these trees did exist, and we will be looking at another class, and we'll also be looking at the work of Clement Reid next week. One of the things I will say is that at places such as Barry, which is just sort of left of Flatum there, and all the way beyond the Gower Peninsula, which is that thing that sticks out like a little head, all the way along there, we've got what Clement Reid refers to as Noah's forests. We do have bits of timber sticking out of other intervals along the Glamorganshire coast. And I'm sure, very, very likely, that if you looked in the muds, in the depths, in the deep depths around Steepholm and Flatum, you'd find bits of Noah's Forest, even today, amongst the rocks and muds of that underground, lost watery landscape of the Bristol Channel. Steepholm itself could be said to be the more archaeologically explored islands within the Bristol Channel. It's become more archaeologically explored over more recent years. The difference between Steepholm and Flatum is that Flatum has been very much mucked around with from the Napoleonic War all the way through to Palmerston's Follies in the 1860s, into the period of the First World War, the Second World War, and beyond. So we've all got all this, and the Victorian stuff as well. So we've got all this damage being caused on Flatum, but there's a little bit more that seems to have not eluded us on Steepholm itself. Let's have a little look at one of those images of Steepholm. There it is, sticking out there. It's surprising how close it is to the English side. It sticks out there. And I wonder if we could just jump in there and do a bit of skinny dipping and actually swim over to Steepholm. It's one of those illusions that it's not as close as it looks. I wouldn't want to try swimming it. So it's basically an island that covers an area of over 60 acres at mean low water. And the land that stands above that at high water is just under 50 acres. At its highest point itself, it dominates the landscape, not just in the past, but today as well. It does stick out. It's quite some distance away from the South Wales coastline, but you can clearly see it. Probably see it better sometimes than you can Flatum, particularly when there's a fog-like atmosphere across the Bristol Channel. So it sticks out with 78 meters, but you can imagine this would have been a much taller and much bigger rock many, many thousands of years ago. It's administered by the English side, as Flatum is administered by the Welsh side. So Peter's right in saying this is a Carboniferous rock. It's a Carboniferous rock itself that could be said acts as a wind and wave break within the Bristol Channel. It's a landscape that sees some archaeology come into us over recent years and over much more later years. It's a shame that we weren't doing the Roman stuff today, because I would say that there's evidence of some kind of military undertakings going on Steepholm itself. Definitely, I mentioned that in my book, Romans in South Wales, special edition. I did actually mention that. So yeah, Peter's right. This is a continuation of the Mendip Hills. This is so what we can say, and I'll spit it out. That one time the likes of Steepholm and Flatum and Denny Island and all the other little bits and bobs in the Bristol Channel were actually part of the sea floor, because the Carboniferous rock was formed under the sea. It was the sea floor, it was the sea. And then what we do actually see is that there's changes. By the Triassic period, 200 million years ago, these great rocks had been pushed up by the tectonic plate action. And being pushed up, these were eroded and formed into little islands amongst a sandstone landscape, a great sort of lake, a huge lake that once existed. Where all that sandstone has eroded away in more recent millennia, the Carboniferous rock has stood out to offer us these islands today. So again, it would have been sort of great to have looked at this island from a sense of its full history. And what we do find, there were excavations involving a cave at this location called Five Johns Cave, which was explored in 1975. Within that cave, interesting enough, we found very early signs of human activity, not going back tens of thousands of years, but enough evidence nevertheless to tell us that people in the Mesolithic period, as far back as 8,000 years ago, were actually on this hill as it was back then. Do you know, I gotta tell that story that I always like to go to when I come to this point, when I think and maybe extend and try for us to try and understand what's going on within the Bristol Channel. So what we can actually see there, we can see Coldy Island a little bit further over. We can see Lundy Island, and you can't see our two little islands which we've mentioned, Steepholm and Flatum. But basically between Cardiff and Weston-super-Mare, there's where the two islands would be on this little plan. So that little line at Barnstable Bay, Lundy Island, a little bit further out, that's where the sea would have lapped around 12,000 years ago. Maybe the coastline was further out than that. And when we actually talk about Paviland Cave, and we think about that little thing that sticks out there, that little sort of head-like thing on the base of a toe, it's said that the coastline was even much further out, 34,000 years ago, than, as I've mentioned, 12,000 years ago. And I used to tell this little story of people as they would encroach upon this ever-changing landscape. You think about 12,000 years ago, you think about the landscape as having mammoths, woolly rhinoceroses. You would have had various grades of horses wandering across this landscape in the summer months. This is 12,000 years ago, albeit. And what people used to do was they used to follow these animals, and obviously in turn be followed by packs of wolves themselves. And it's very interesting to think that when we do talk about Steepholm, it might have been between that period of 12,000 years ago and about 8,000 years ago. If we go back to that, it might have been that period that people were actually living on that island, which was then sort of a hill in amongst the trees, and they would look across this ever-changing landscape and just think, as time went by, as generation went with generation, people would have started to see the water level slowly encroaching from a distance. And one time, probably around 7,000 years ago, you were not able to get to Steepholm Island without getting your feet wet. At least 6,000 years ago, Steepholm would have been a proper island within the Bristol Channel. And then eventually the same fate would hit the likes of Flatum. Now, this is one of the things, you see. This is one of the great sort of enigmas of Pete talking about Flatum and me now talking about Steepholm. And it's a very, very difficult enigma. And I think Pete might understand more than anybody what I'm just about to say. So what we're going to do Steep. And the reason why I haven't got as many images and prepped on here today was I've got to be very careful of how much space these images actually take up. So I'm just going to see if I can just get an aerial view a minute. There we go. Bingo. There it is, Steepholm. the concept is this: when Pete has groups of people on Flatum, for example, as there are groups of people with when they go to Steepholm, when you talk about Mesolithic flints and scrapers being found, people think, oh, how did people get out here? That's the first thing that people think. We got out here by boat. They must have got out here by boat as well. And it's a very difficult concept to put across, saying, actually, 8,000 years ago, this wasn't an island. It was actually a hill. It's trying to put that concept across because it's very difficult, because you've actually just traveled there by boat. There's only one way of getting to these islands now today, is by boat, or if you go over by helicopter or something. And it's that very difficult concept. And you think, well, and then when you start to explain to people, you know, you've got Mesolithic scrapers being found on Steepholm. You think, well, oh, they must have been a bit isolated, but they weren't. They were connected to the land. This is the thing. And I think Pete would understand that more than anybody, that at one point it's a very difficult concept being on these islands and then thinking of them as hills and then suddenly surrounded by water. But when Pete's been with me and we visited the likes of Sully Island, which was not an island 700 years ago, it was connected to the land. Sully Island in the Bristol Channel is, you know, there's prehistoric stuff on it, but it's not a prehistoric island. You got the fear of being surrounded by sea and getting trapped on that island, and then 8 hours later, then getting off and then getting into your car and going home. And you feel that, you think, oh, you're able to walk out to it, and now you're not able to walk out to it because you're going to be trapped by the incoming tide which surrounds Sully Island. And I think the point I'm trying to make is trying to get that concept that times have changed. Things are very, very different, and the concept of the space is very, very different when you look at Steepholm today than what it was like in the past. And you might think that Steepholm itself would have been absolutely perfect for people to have actually looked out over the landscape when they'd felled all the trees. But then again, Steepholm itself today is actually crowned by trees, with the wonderful monk jack deer that wander across the island. Another thing that you might be able to sort of connect with is that when it's become an island, there's another concept you need to look into where you've got evidence of Neolithic flints as well, Neolithic flints and scrapers, and then and only then you can have some parallel of understanding with the Neolithic people, because by the Neolithic people, this was truly an island. And there's only one way these Neolithic people could have got to the island, was by boat. So you're on the same experiences that they are on. I told you I was going to go into my Wednesday evening classes. It's just happened. So you've got the same experience that they're looking at. The Neolithic people could only communicate with the island by boat. You're communicating with Steepholm by boat, right? You're getting the same experience as Neolithic people, except there's more distance to travel to actually get to Steepholm by water today than you would have in the Neolithic period. And then you can think, well, what are people in the Neolithic period doing on the island? Are they actually hunting on the island? If they are hunting, then how many of them are there? Were they actually living on the island? And so on and so on. There's all these different things that you can actually think of in regards to Steepholm. So what I'd like to do now, that was quite deep. I didn't want to spend too much time on these islands today, so I just need to look at Lundy now, and that's where we're going to go. I don't know if we're going to get onto Denny Island before the break, but we've got to try and deal with Coldy Island today as well. So right, so we're going to move away from Steepholm now. So what I got to do, I've got to get rid of all these images, as I said. Let's just quickly do this. Sorry about this little bit of faff today. We'll keep that map there. We'll keep that one there. And we've got Lundy Island. Now, right at the top of that spit, we've got a nice bit of archaeological evidence which we're going to actually discuss. And we're going to have a a little talk about that. And what we do have is we've got a prehistoric excavation that's been going on. The top end of that island is called North End. That's where we're looking at. And we've actually got a proper prehistoric settlement there. Now, I'm going to say it because I know Pete is. If there was a lot more archaeological work undertaken on Steepholm as it was on Flatum, we might get similar archaeological evidences that we are going to talk about in regards to this island itself, Lundy Island. Okay, and there's our Lundy Island. That sort of puts her in context. It's way out. It's on the boundary between the world of water 12,000 years ago and the world of land 12,000 years ago. So a few miles out, you'd have stood on this rock and you'd have said, there's the ocean out there. But you wouldn't have been able to see the ocean from Steepholm 12,000 years ago. The ocean was so far away. But if you stood on the edge, you might be able to look back and actually see these little hills like Steepholm and Flatum visible. And when we think about it, these landscapes of Flatum, Steepholm, Lundy, Coldy Island, Denny Island, or whatever. That's another point as well. If you looked at an Admiralty chart, you would actually see points within the Bristol Channel that would indicate that there were other hillocks, and for a time other islands. A Scare Point would be a good example of the Porthcawl coastline that would have at one point been occupied like Lundy, like Steepholm, like Flatum, and so on. Yeah, so this is what we're sort of looking at. So it's part of the old English side, it's part of Devon, and the island itself is much bigger than Steepholm and Flatum. You know, you could get lost on Lundy Island, where it'd be very difficult to get lost on Flatum. But yeah, I've got lost on Flatum, but let's not tell Pete that. You could probably get lost a little bit on Steepholm, but Lundy itself is much bigger than these other islands. Lundy Island itself is a 3-mile sausage, weird shaped sausage, and it's not a mile wide at the widest point. It's more like a kilometre wide at the widest point. That's sort of south part of the island, and it's got a long and turbulent history, and even the likes of 2 Heinkel bombers crashing on the island back in 1941. But we're not doing any of that. Let's just sort of have a little look. But there's one thing that I haven't really mentioned about Steepholm, which bit of a problematic area with Steepholm and Flatum. And the reason why I didn't mention this, but it's likely that we've got some indigenous plants, indigenous species that have probably hung on Lundy when some of these species have become more extinct on Flatum and Steepholm. I know Flatum and Steepholm, before Pete says this, which he probably will, there are indigenous plants and so on Flatum and Steepholm, but because Flatum and Steepholm have been very much changed and altered over the years, it doesn't have the array of flora and fauna that Lundy, for example, has. Oh, and God, if you want to go into the full history of London, you could talk about the Knights Templars in 1189, Lundy, and all these wonderful things. And it's associated with the Orkney Viking sagas of the 1100s as well. So Lundy itself is known about. We know about it. That there's pirates and there's saints, as we see with Flatum and Steepholm and all these things. But we're not doing that today. But what we do find is the island is big enough to be offering some kind of settlement today, and also is big enough to offer and preserve some of its early Mesolithic and Neolithic evidences. and Bronze Age burial mounds, and even evidence from that early Christian period in regards to inscribed gravestones and so on. So I thought, right, what I really need to do, I need to get more of a taste with Lundy. And on the back of what we've just said with Steepholm, for example. And there it is. Do you know what? Lundy reminds me of those islands within the Orcadian archipelago. It's sort of got this thing that there's lots of things on it, and there are people living on these islands, but it's got that sort of sense about it, sense of sense of diversity that you do see with islands in off the Orkney archipelago, like the island of Ede, Stronsay, Sanday, Chappensay, and so on, where there is prehistoric stuff there with small numbers of people living there. And also a famous Welsh wizard lived there, but let's just leave that one. Claire can talk about that with Jessica when they go away in 2 weeks' time. So what I'd like to do is if you focus on the top end of the island, and we go there, way on the top end of the island, there it is. We'll just talk a little bit about the prehistoric nature of the island and how prehistory can seem to offer us some pointers towards a different world. And I will say that island archaeology is very, very different from land archaeology, because it doesn't need to be interfered with and metal detected and destroyed and so on, like normal land archaeology. And you need to make an effort to go over there, and there's not much damage caused to island archaeological sites. Within a prehistoric context, when you're talking about something like Lundy, as opposed to land sites and the likes of Flatum and Steepholm. So the monuments on this island, you can see lots of little boundaries on this, and what you do see is the remains consist of hut circles, field walls from various different periods, small enclosures, stock compounds, burial cairns. There's even archaeological evidence of a Civil War structure on there, a British Civil War structure. And what we do find is that there's a settlement at the northern part of the island. There you can see it's poking out. And this settlement itself is an extensive settlement of just under 500 meters by 350 meters. It's a huge area of archaeology that consists of hut circles, cairns, all mixed in, living landscape, burial landscape. You've got these cairns going to the Bronze Age. And when you think about it, the people of the island, now this is the issue, you see. This is the very, very issue. Let's just go back to the other map a minute. That's a very, very, very interesting issue here. Remember, we're still doing lots of really early prehistoric stuff, so I'm going to try and keep to that rather than doing Bronze Age and Neolithic too much and so on. But the one thing I would say is that the sea itself would have hit this island first. So it's likely that the sea was lapping the edges of Lundy Island, probably within about 1,000 years. And probably then, within a few decades after that, anyone that was on the island was going to be trapped. The only way to actually move was by boat. So the island itself would have held everything that the people of the island needed to create a civilization that lasted in a semi-isolated way from roughly 10,500 years ago up at least into the Bronze Age. When we look at the Bronze Age about 4,000 years ago, for at least 5,000 years, people have got a fairly insular, fairly other than going over to the mainland by boat, sort of isolated life. And we do see this with lots of Scottish islands. We look at Scottish prehistory and we say, why have we got on Orkney, for example, such a developed landscape of Neolithic, when we look at the Ring of Brodgar on Orkney, and then we look at the Bronze Age stuff, when we've got the Iron Age stuff. How are they surviving on the islands? But they did. And in many ways without trees. And we might have seen the clearance of lots of the landscape fairly early on. When I say fairly early on, probably about 8,000 years ago, Lundy may have actually been semi-treeless because people have been living there for 1,000, 2,000 years with and they would have had to have been very much self-sufficient. So there's an important point to be made here. By around 8,000 years ago, Lundy Island, like places in Orkney, Shetland, and the Hebrides, were probably some of the earliest areas of Britain that were very much dependent upon an agricultural lifestyle. People were fixed in the landscape. You couldn't do anything else. You couldn't follow herds of auroch because it would have been a little bit longer then, but a 3-mile long island, all your big stuff is gone. It's dead, right? You've cleared most of the trees. So the only thing that you've got left is agriculture. And this is, and in many ways, and I'm going to say this, you're probably getting this first, 8,500 years ago, these are the places where the agricultural revolution is beginning. These are the places where the Neolithic period is going to begin, right? And it does. It really, really, truly does. When you look at Orkney, the reason why we've got so many innovations coming from Orkney is because people have got to do it. They're forced to do it. And it's the same with Lundy. They're forced to have this developed world far earlier than the rest of us. We're okay. Me and Andy are okay with our little families. We can keep wandering around, sort of doing the thing that we've been doing. But you can't do it on an island like this. And it develops to a very rich tapestry from the Neolithic into the Bronze Age. By 4,000 years ago, you've got settlements, you've got various burials, you've got pottery as well. You've got all this evidence coming from this landscape. And when we think about it, I'm gonna spit it out. The stone hut circles and the stone circle settlements were the dwelling places of prehistoric farmers, as I say, from very early on. Even though most date to 4,000 years ago, we've got evidence much earlier as well. These are stone-based roundhouses. And basically, when we talk about stone-based roundhouses, they're in hollows and they've got stone walls and whatever timber that they can use to create roofs. And around there would be low walls and earthen and turf banks supporting and assisting to support the roof. And if you don't have thatch or you don't have reeds and so on, which would be very limited on an island like this, you've got ponds, but not many. You're going to have to use turf on the roof, or you're going to have to use heather on the roof, or you're going to have to use any slabs available on the roof to create a roof. So lots of the archaeology associated with islands like this uses what you've got: earth sods to create walls, stone to create walls. The material you're going to burn is going to be material washed up along the beach, as we see with places like Skara Brae, where the kelp itself is being washed up, and you can gather that together and dry it out and burn it. I know Pete's got that experience in that bothy on the island of Hoy. And again, you've got the very earliest evidence of field systems, people creating boundaries for fields. And that's very, very important. You know, you could have an open landscape and you have a little bit of a field over there and whatever. But if you've got a field over there and you've got grazing sheep over there and the grazing sheep can go into that field, then you've lost your crop. Vis-a-vis, if you've lost your crop, you don't have any winter stock to feed the animals. The animals die, everybody's dead. So you've got to create boundaries to stop these animals, these grazing ungulates, sheep and goats, wandering into these areas. So this is why you've got to create walls. Do you know what? I've got some first-hand experience of this. We planted about 100 trees here where we are, and we were really pleased as punch. And then we've got 6 sheep, and then we've managed to save most of them, but the sheep was actually starting to eat the new buds coming through on the trees that we'd planted the previous season, and a sheep can absolutely completely devastate the landscape. And this is another point I was talking to. I remember having this conversation with my lecturer on Shetland, Simon Clark. I said, Simon, why is there so few trees on Shetland compared to Orkney? And he said, look around you. And I said, yeah, it's just there's grass everywhere. He said, look around you. Oh, there's sheep. He said, that's why. Because on Shetland, the sheep are allowed to roam more or less vis-a-vis anywhere, right? You can't plant any trees because the sheep will just eat it. That's why you can't colonize places like Shetland and Orkney unless you put up new fences and new boundary walls and so on, which the likes of Lundy, they learned very early on. I'm not saying they haven't put boundaries on places like Orkney and Shetland. That'd be ridiculous for me to say that they haven't, because they have. But there are vast open areas of common land on Shetland that have got no boundaries, and that just the sheep roam everywhere and you can't recolonize them. So you know, that thing as well is when you remove trees and you introduce animals like the sheep or the goat, you know, it changes everything. You know, it does change everything. You know, we blame ourselves for the complete devastation of these landscapes. Yeah, we could blame ourselves for the complete devastation of these landscapes. But if Mother Nature wants to reestablish itself, we don't have sheep and goats. We don't have them. And we certainly don't have pigs. If you've got sheep, goats, and maybe pigs, you can't reestablish the natural order of the landscape. And, you know, it's not just us that's destroyed the landscape, it's the animals that we brought with us. And that's the very, very important point. So, again, I'm just going to go on to my notes as well. Just sort of, we'll call it a break in a moment, right? So, if we again remind ourselves, praise ourselves of where we are, and we're looking on that edge again, and we go back up there. There we go. The archaeology itself, the archaeology itself, even though it's dominated by moorland today, but it was once a striking landscape with trees on it, and it would have been magical. It would have been very magical. And I think I might be right in saying, and I'm not exactly sure, I've tested the following, but it's very likely that trees themselves would have become completely colonized and established on the islands before the landscape of the Bristol Channel, right? And the reason why I'm saying that, because within the landscape of the Bristol Channel, there's still herds of animals just wandering back and forth. So they would have trampled much of the new tree growth and grazed upon much of the tree growth coming through. For the likes of Lundy and the likes of Flatum, for example, the trees would have become established and it would have been a very, very rich landscape. So this would have created very, very rich soils much before anywhere else. And my notes do tell me that we definitely do have evidence of people living on the island 10,000 years ago, just before the island becomes isolated from the mainland forever. And yes, I'm going to show you, I'm going to chuck another little bit of a fact for Andy. There's 150 shipwrecks recorded surrounding the island alone within the Bristol Channel. 150 shipwrecks. So you can imagine the water is very choppy and the water is very dangerous. So if you're gonna, you know, this will have had this will have been marked. So if you're going to be there, that you're probably not going to go anywhere for the rest of your life. So what we're going to do, I'm going to have to delete all these images now. I'll delete that one and we'll delete that one. So what we're going to do, we're going to see if there are any questions. I'll keep those two up there. Right, so that's done. And I'm going to go back to there and stop sharing. Right, so anyone got any questions? Pete, keep Flatum to Flatum, please. So go on, Pete. I can't hear you.
I said, no, that was fine. No, you did well, that was fine. And on Steephome, we have found evidence of a Roman watchtower there.
Yes, yes. And this is why it's a shame we're not doing that period today, but it would be,
Yeah.
Obviously way in the future, that would be a good one to repeat this and see what else we can get in those periods. That'd be good. Anyway, thanks for that, Pete. Jeannie?
When did it become an island? I mean,
Right, so I'm
there are
going,
lots of it's an island.
I'm gonna, it would have been definitely an island in the Roman period. I'll just repeat I'll just recap what I've said really. We'll just put
Okay.
this back up and just sort of
The
where
rivers, the rivers coming down have mainly made them into islands.
Yeah.
You've got major rivers. You've got the Avon, the Severn, the Wye, and the Usk, all coming down there. Which
exactly
is why we got the second highest tide range in the world.
after the Bay of Fundy in Canada.
Yeah.
I tell you what, me and Pete went to the same school. I was always taught when I was a Guide Friday guide to say the highest, the Bristol Channel has the second highest rise and fall of tide anywhere on the world after the Bay of Fundy in Canada. Did you read the same book as me? Right. But the point is with Lundy, what it is. 12,000 years ago, you were sat on Lundy Island looking out over at the sea, right? At Steephome and Flatum, it was very much a frozen tundra landscape. Pete's right about the rivers gradually shaping things, right? But that's over time. What's happening is that by about 11,000 years ago, the water is lapping at the base of Lundy Island. Between 11,000 and 10,000 years ago, Lundy Island was a complete island. So you can imagine that if what we do find, again, that date 10,000 years ago, what we do find is archaeological evidence on the island. And at that point, 11 and 10,000 years ago, you've got people isolated on the island, having to scrape a living with what they had. And they were able to do it, and may I add, Drina, for quite some time, for at least 8,000 years in relative isolation, because the currents between Lundy Island and the mainland then would have been very, very treacherous. And I tell you what, if you'd have probably just stayed on the island and that was it. But to have stayed on the island and been self-sufficient and self-supportive, you would have needed all the ability to do that. Does that answer your question, Drina?
Yeah, thank you.
Good. Okay then, right. Be very wary of time now. Andy?
I was just wondering whether there was any Paleolithic remains on any of them.
Not that we know of so far, but I was thinking that, when we were talking about when we were talking about Steephome, and I just thought the cave evidence on Steephome, I'm just thinking, well, maybe in the mouth there on that's like a could have been a potential Paleolithic habitat.
Yeah.
But I would say that like Steephome and Flatum, unlike Lundy, because we've got a lot of work on Lundy, there's not been as much work as there could have been, right? And I think if an archaeological team went over to Flatum and said, look, we're going to stay on here for 2 weeks, we're going to concentrate on a specific area of the island, they would be able to answer many more questions. It's the same with Steepholm as well.
Yeah.
People this is what's happened on Steepholm. People have got carried away with the Roman stuff and the medieval stuff, the priory on Steepholm. And they got really carried away. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that, but let's see more of the earlier stuff. And I would like to see more of the earlier stuff on Flatum, but then again, you'll see that it's not very much forthcoming.
No, I'd be surprised if there wasn't.
On Steepholm, they've uncovered what they think is a burial chamber. They were digging down, and what they thought first of all was a drainage system. They came across a curved wall.
Yeah, a foggy hole.
And then the wall seemed to extend, and then it was believed to have been a burial chamber.
Yeah, how could I have missed that one out? Yeah, that's correct. You are right. Yeah, that's been reported.
It's not long been done.
Yeah, it's not been clarified yet, but you are right. Something. Yeah, thanks for that, Pete. So that would take it in a burial context, or maybe if it's not a burial context, it's a foggy hole, a fogu, as we see in Cornwall and other places. Actually, Pete, when we've been to Orkney, there are these souterrains on Orkney, and we've been down them. They exist. So Orkney's an island, and so is Lundy. So there's no reason why there couldn't have been these souterrains on Steepholm as much as there could have been on Flatum as well, and Lundy as well. So,
well, access to Steepholm is very difficult.
Yes, and it would have been even more difficult. Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Oh yeah, thanks for that one. That's. I'm glad you re-mentioned that. Thank you. Right, okay. Let's see if there's any other questions. David.
No, thank you.
Jess. Okay, Pat.
No, thank you.
Claire.
No.
And Anne, Lady Sabita.
Civita.
No, you should say yes, sir.
Oh, sorry. But you weren't saying my name right, so I might not have recognised it.
I'm sorry, I'm the teacher. I decide what I call it, right? Not...
Anyway, I did have a question.
Oh.
With the isolated population on an island doing farming, normally, well, what has happened in many places that the population grows, and an isolated position would have probably given them problems. Is there any evidence of hunger and because they weren't able to expand their food?
I would say that the evidence of the souterrain, for example, context in Orkney, may indicate it. Say that's not what there is on Steepholm, but the idea of the idea of actually having subterranean areas means that their food is being protected, or something's being protected underground, or they've done these on purpose, right? So they're very wary of the winds and conditions. And what we have seen recently is that if we can get 120-mile-an-hour winds and doing the devastation that they've done very recently, these winds did exist in the past, and we seem to forget that. And they had different ways of dealing with these things in the past. Yeah. Can you imagine being on an island like this with really choppy seas and maybe the water flying over places like Lundy and Steepholm, right? What the hell are you going to do in these situations, right? You could have water breaking completely over Lundy. It would have been terrifying. These people wouldn't been able to get off these islands when there was those conditions either. So what did they do? How did they survive? There was ways of them doing so.
Yeah.
The Vikings that landed on Flatum, some of them actually died of malnutrition because of the lack of sufficient vegetation.
Yeah.
They could catch plenty of fish, but there was a very shortage of vegetation. Some of them actually died of malnutrition, and eventually they left the island and went across to France and Ireland.
Yes, yes, yes. That all makes sense. That all makes sense. Oh, and by the way, somebody online, Peter and Andy, they said, thanks, Carl, for your streams. Love Pete and Andy. They should do some lessons. I'm out of a bloody job, yeah. I should.
Can we get a discount?
Hang on a minute. Oh, yeah. No, if you teach your own class, you pay, but you get a discount. Well done, Andy.
Well, you have paid me in the past.
Oh, now
Hey,
you
wait a
give
minute,
back
not paid me.
ideas. I tell you what, Mr. Wood, right? Keep your ideas to yourself. Anyway, we're gonna take a break now. We'll take a break and we'll be back in 10 minutes maybe. Streaming's okay, so we'll see how it goes. I'll see you in 10 minutes.
Okay.
Okay.
I'm gonna turn my my thingy off, so just make sure. You can't talk amongst yourselves, guys. I'm not going to be here.
The number of people that used Flatum and Steepholm Island as a place of seclusion in the past has really been its main use. So, you know, St. Caddock was over on Steepholm, on Flatum for many times. You go over there during Lent and stay there. The mother of King Harold II, she was out there after the death of her son, Harold II, at the Battle of Hastings. Two of the knights that killed Thomas of Becket in Canterbury Cathedral are buried out there.
That'll be the Templar connection again, is it then?
Yeah, the Knights
Yeah.
Templar,
Yeah.
Sir Hugh de Morville and Sir Reginald Fitners was the two that we believe are buried on Flatum Island.
Mhm.
Their graves are absolutely unmarked. They didn't want anyone to know who they were and why they were there.
That kind of goes with the Templar principle, doesn't it, of modesty, even though they might have murdered somebody where they shouldn't have done.
Yeah.
Perhaps. Yes, it was never confirmed, was it? Yeah, we have a couple in there's a couple of graves in Furness Abbey with just a little four-pointed cross on it. But I don't know, that's a Cistercian abbey, so it's probably they probably are Templars, but no names, nothing. Very
A
simple.
couple of little
grave.
crosses like that out on Flatum.
Yeah.
No names, nothing, just
Yeah.
a cross.
It's funny how it's just little places like that can have such a rich history, isn't it?
Oh yes, I say I'm still fascinated by Flatum. I must
Yeah.
admit, really fascinated by the place.
I wonder what it is about places. I mean, you know, so we have up here, we have the Furness Peninsula, and just towards the very end of it, it's full of it, absolutely full of it. Prehistoric, right through into the Middle Ages, and you know, and until the abolition of the monasteries. Extremely wealthy area because of the wool and the iron and all the rest of it. But people have just lived there for thousands of years. But the monasteries certainly like their seclusion, don't they?
Yeah, we realized there was some form of monastery building on Flatum. But I'm still looking for it. I've got a place where I think it must be.
Yeah.
They've got what is remains of a floor near the farmhouse, and some are saying, "Oh, that was an extension of the." But I'm sure it wasn't. There are other areas. I'm sure where there would have been.
Well, that'd be ideal for a hermitage, wouldn't it?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, we know St. Caddock spent so much time out there with other bishops, so he was accompanied by bishops.
Oh, he did he? Yeah.
Yes, oh yes. Gualches and Barrack were two of the bishops which accompanied him out there. And on this one occasion, when St. Caddock got back to Barry, he found that his book that he needed for a mass at Llancarvan was left behind. So he sent them back to get it. So they went back and retrieved the book. But on their way back to Barry, their boat capsized and they were both drowned. And Gwelches was washed up on Flatum Island, and Barrack was washed up on Barry Island. And that's where we believe the name of Barry came from.
Right. Isn't there some sort of legend about the book turning up somewhere strange as well?
Well, yeah, well, apparently St. Caddoc was very hungry and he asked some fishermen to go catch a fish, and they got an enormous salmon. And when they opened up the salmon, they found the book inside. I'm not quite sure the veracity of that.
May have been a smaller book than we'd originally thought.
You would have thought so, yes.
Definitely a pocket-sized one.
Yeah. Can't claim the veracity of that.
No, I seem to remember that there was some sort of funny little story with that. I like things like that. It's almost like one of the Irish legends, isn't it? That.
Yeah. I always add that on when I'm giving the talk.
Because that's what happens when you sit on an island a bit too long.
There's a whole poem about sleeping on an island. You'll never be the same.
That's probably true.
Whenever you sleep on an island, you may use the same old name. You may look as you did before, but you'll never be the same. Got that here somewhere.
What a size island that means. I mean, if you think of it, we're an island race. But I don't know that we'd be really different if it had been brought up on the continent, would we? Depends how big the island is that makes the difference, perhaps. A little one would be more transforming, perhaps.
Yeah, I had a funny experience. I have usually a fairly good sense of direction, and we were on this little island in the Maldives, the capital, in fact. Had some time to spare. Mali, is it? I think it might be. Can't remember. But and we went for a walk. We thought we'll have a walk around before our flight out. So it came out to the coast, and I thought, oh, I'm really disorientated. That shouldn't be there. That shouldn't be. And then I realized that I'd actually walked right across the island. It had only been 10 minutes. It was such a small island.
Yeah.
I thought, right, that makes sense. Now the water's on that, we're going that way. That makes much more sense.
Mary Gillam, who was a well-known botanist and naturalist, she came up with this: sleeping on an island. If once you've slept on an island, you'll never be quite the same. You may look as you did the day before, go by the same old name. You may bustle about in street and shop. You may sit at home and sew, but you'll see blue water and wheeling gulls wherever your feet may go. You may chat with neighbours of this and that, and close to your fireside keep, but you'll hear ships' whistles and lighthouse bell, and tides beat through your sleep. You won't know why, and you can't say how such change upon you came. But once you've slept on an island, you'll never be quite the same. That's true.
That's really nice.
Having slept out on the island on a few times, yes, that is true.
Yeah, that's very good. That to the point.
Here's one for COVID. Only the tide goes out. Only the tide goes out. Only a bug could make a nation go into self-isolation, because only the tide goes out. Pigeons walk the street where folk no longer meet, because only the tide goes out. The only entertainment to be had in self-containment is TV or home maintainment, because only the tide goes out. Nowadays, you can communicate and talk to family and mates. Use the internet to see faces of you and me. There are still things to chat about, because only the tide goes out. You can still have talks of ancient things of buildings and princes and long dead kings, while seeing faces of you and me, all thanks to Archaeology Cymru. There you go.
Yeah, it's very good.
I wrote that some time ago. There we are.
Did you hear that? I remember you reading that a while ago, but shortly afterwards, I heard somebody else with a very similar one. Do you know if it's got published anywhere, that one?
Oh, no, I tell you who came up with it was Max Boyce. Came up with one very similar.
Right. He was a funny guy. Him and his big boots. Max Boyce. Well, is he still around, Max Boyce?
I think he is, but you don't see much of him now.
No.
I had a wonderful evening with Max Boyce once. I took my friend who said she never went in a posh, used to go to the theatre, and so I set up a box, and I set up champagne to be served, and I packed the theatre with her friends, and borrowed a tiara that she had to put on, and everybody was waving, and Max Boyce was because I took her to a pantomime, I thought it was a better thing to go to, and we asked the management, would he honour her, as being royalty. And they said, well, they didn't know what he'd do. He was marvellous, Max Boyce. He came out, we've got royalty here tonight. The whole cast curtsied and bowed to her. It was absolutely super evening. It was a real good joke. It took me some while to set up, but it was a great joke to play on her. But he was.
When I remember,
I thought that was really nice.
When I remember of him, he was standing by a grave. And he was standing over the grave and said, why did you have to die? Why did you have to die? You could have lived a bit longer. Why did you have to die? And someone asked him, is that you very sorry, is that a friend of yours? No, it's my wife's ex-husband. There we are. We do have fun on these things, don't we?
Yeah.
As the tide race in the Bristol Channel is so fast and so powerful that it could generate something like 6% of the UK's power usage. And whereas the sun sometimes shines and sometimes don't, and the wind blows and
really
sometimes
good,
don't,
isn't it?
the tide goes in and out forever.
Well, I keep wondering why we don't do more about tidal.
But absolutely.
I mean, because it is so regular and reliable.
It is. It's always there.
Yeah.
There we are.
They don't listen to us, though, do they? It's people who make the decision.
Yeah, if only we were in charge. Yeah, that's all right.
That's right.
Yeah, well, apparently you've got a couple of people who've been loving listening to you guys talking in the break.
Oh.
Apparently, it's called the Peter and Andy session. And
thank you.
They've been loving the banter, and apparently it looks like I'm going to be out of a job if you carry on. So anyway, let me get my image up there. Yes, we got a couple of regulars online. So I had 7 people earlier on. I was quite shocked. So here we go. I'm just gonna do that a minute. Hang on. I'll get started now. I'm on. So next week we'll be looking at the antiquarian geologist archaeologist Clement Reid and his work, and specifically it's quite sad really, but he wrote this book and he did all the research, and he was never recognized in his landscape in his lifetime for everything he was saying, because everything he was saying actually turned out to be correct. Nobody believed. What I'm telling you now is that, you know, Britain was an island, but people didn't believe it. Like, people couldn't. You know, I'll start again. Yeah, no, I'll start again. I missed that. What people couldn't believe was that Britain was connected to Europe. They just couldn't get it in their minds. They just thought it's such an impossible concept, thinking that Britain was connected to Europe. It was such an impossible idea that you could walk all the way from Italy, across the Alps, across France, all the way across into Britain and go all the way up to Orkney. It was such an impossible concept. Nobody ever believed it. Nobody wanted to be attached to Europe. You know, particularly when you look at Clement Reid, and his book is starting to be sold in 1914. But everything that he was saying came out to be very truthful, that we were connected to Europe once and there were all these forests everywhere. So
you look at the DNA of people in far eastern Russia, and then you go across to Alaska, and the DNA is very similar. So those people came right across the north, the north of Europe, from one side right across to the other, right across the Americas.
Exactly. So right, okay, we're gonna crack on now. And the next one we're going to be looking at is a little known island called Flatum. We will be doing this very briefly, Pete, and the reason why I want to do this very briefly.
Yeah, I won't interrupt. Don't go on.
No, don't worry, Pete. It's because we mentioned Flatum a lot over the years, and if I ever need you to do a talk, Pete, then you can do Flatum again, and hopefully nobody's heard it.
Every group in South Wales has heard it at one point.
Yeah, exactly. You've been banned, haven't you? Right. So where we are now, we've done our Lundy. We're going to look at. We've done our steep home just above Weston-super-Mare. Barry, just sort of off between Cardiff and Barry. You've got Flatum, which we'll have a look at now. Further on again, we'll be looking at Denny Island. So we've got location for that. I'm gonna take this map off now to sort of save bandwidth. So we've sort of got that there, so we know where we are. It's just going to be a little bit of a brief thing with Flatum now, but we could not do Flatum without. Do you know what? I was supposed to be doing Denny next. Never mind. So there's our wonderful Flatum. And one thing that Peter said, and I was listening to this in the break. The poem about the island, and I got to be honest with you, I've slept on Flatum for a few nights. I was part of a group that stayed on Flatum to do some work out there, and I think I was out there for maybe 2 or 3 nights, and I can remember if you could walk around the island and it would like take 10 minutes. You walk around the edge and you would think, oh, right. And it would just like, time would go so slow. You could spend a day on Flatum and it would be like that you had been there like 3 or 4 days. And because everything's condensed and everything that you need is on Flatum, if you haven't got it, then you haven't got it. And it was a very weird concept. And people in the past would have had the same thinking, and it's just the idea that you don't want to leave. And I know what Pete's talking about when he loves his Flatum so very much. Now
you can hear the silence.
Yes, you can hear the silence. It's an island which, as I've described, has got a very, very long history. And if we go into more recent times, and obviously this is where I don't want to go, what we do see is that it's got that religious association that Peter mentioned with St. Caddoc. It's got that association with the military past when we look at the Napoleonic Wars, all the way through to the likes before that when we got the Trinity Lighthouse, 1737, and we've got all that type of stuff. So it's got a rich history. Unfortunately, that over time has affected and damaged the very, very early history because there's been so much change on the island. You know, we have very strange indigenous plants, not as many as the island of Lundy, but we've got a certain type of indigenous wild leek, for example, and we've got a very interesting rock plant such as the rock sea lavender. I can remember when I went out there, when I was a child in the 1980s. I remember we would go out and we would identify these things when the Flatum project was really early established. Strangely enough, there's slow worms on Flatum, which they would have obviously got there, and that's an indication that we've got that it was connected to the land at one time, because slow worms can't swim. So that's an interesting point. That's proof vis-a-vis that we've got access to the land. And what we do find is that some of the earliest evidence, there are traces of Bronze Age evidence on the island, and I'm pretty sure I've actually seen the Bronze Age axe. That is the bronze axe, the Bronze Age, the bronze axe that has been found on the island. That was actually found in 1988. So, you know, it would be so good that we could go a little bit deeper to try and understand the prehistoric origins of Flatum. But it's only down to time, and eventually we might actually come up and glean more about its early prehistoric origins. Is there anything else you want to add to that, Peter? I've kept that slightly open if there's anything else you wanted to add, because there is one thing I know you're going to add to this, so go for it.
That axe head is actually in the Cardiff Story Museum, where the old library used to be. It's in there. I have actually seen it in there.
Ah, right. So what was the axe that I saw on the island that day when I went over?
Well, that is a model of it.
Ah, right. That's what I wanted.
They took it and they put it in the museum.
Got you. Anything you want to add to the prehistoric stuff before we go on to Denny?
No, you covered it fairly well. Like I said, there is stuff there that we still need to find.
Exactly.
I mean, the lead mine and silver mine over there, you know, things like that, which were there for a very long time ago.
And we've got copper as well, have we?
Well, we know we got lead and silver.
We've got lead.
I found quite a bit of galena in places over there.
Yes. And this is one of the things, you see, not to sort of take away the energy of the likes of the late Iron Age and going into the Roman era. There's lots of talk, and I've mentioned it in my own books about Flatum being a very important resource in the late Iron Age and early Roman era for mining. And again, the problem is when we look at that, and the reason why I mentioned the copper bit, which is, you know, I'm not exactly sure that there would be any traces of copper there. But when we think about lead, and even lead and silver go together hand in hand, and you think, well, you know, all that exploitation again would have destroyed any earlier prehistoric evidence.
Yeah.
But we need to wait and see if we can find any earlier prehistoric evidence associated with Flatum. So, as I said, I want to keep the Flatum a little bit brief. But what I want us to do now is that we've done our Flatum there, and I want us to go to and we've got Coldy coming up as well. I'll just do a couple more images here. You know, I sort of use that, and that's sort of looking over from the South Glamorgan coastline, sort of looking over there. It's 3 miles away from the South Wales coast. You wouldn't be able to swim out there because it's got some very dangerous rocks in the way. And that was the point I was going to make. It's the spires, isn't it, Pete? The rock formation that sticks out there on the way. It's known as the spire, isn't it? Yeah. That would have been an island at one point as well. However, that would have been a little hillock at one point as well, and probably had trees and maybe
you've got the wolves as well.
The wolves, that's it. The spires and the wolves, exactly. These little outcrops in the Bristol Channel that would have been part of that very interesting, diverse landscape that you could see from a distance. Those little hillocks that were then turned into islands, and eventually those little small ones, the wolves and the spires, would have been eroded away, and any occupational evidence would have been lost forever. So the unusual one, and do you know what?
That story of the three sailors there on that, what you were showing, there, they knocked on the door of the farmhouse at 3 o'clock in the morning because they'd been drinking in Barry and they were drunk, and they'd taken to sea and got lost. And they eventually came up on Flatum Island at 3 o'clock in the morning and were knocking on the door. And it frightened the warden and a couple of students to death.
And the thing is, it's probably easier to get to Flatum than it is Steeple. And I don't know if you would agree with that, Pete, but you can. It doesn't take the southwesterly waves as brutal as Steeple. And you know, it is easier to get to there. But
just land on West Beach and you'll be fine.
Yeah, exactly. So one thing I want us to do now is I want us to look at this little rock here. It's known as Denny Island. It's southwest of the King Charles Bridge, and you can see it's this little rock that sticks out. And if we go to there in the distance, this is what you can see. Now I mentioned Denny Island a couple of times. It's a very, very odd one. It's a very strange one. And it's again Carboniferous rock. And there it is, some of the grasses that actually grow on Denny Island. It's a small uninhabited rocky island of just under half an acre. Now that may not sound a big area, but I've got 3 acres. No, we've got 4 acres here, and the area that we hold the sheep and the goats is like just over half an acre, which is basically what this island is, 0.6 acres. It's actually it's big enough area actually, and if we sort of look at that there. It sticks out, and it's very, very difficult to get out to. And I've always fancied undertaking an archaeological excavation there because there would be some archaeology still there. There's scrub vegetation that would indicate that there's soil still on the island. It's not been completely tossed away of its archaeology. It's actually administered by Monmouthshire, but you can better access it from the English side. And when we think about this, it's never been archaeologically excavated. There's been no archaeological work undertaken on it, so it would be absolutely fascinating. It hasn't had the same modern human military activity occupying the island in regards to the likes of Steeple and Flatum. It hasn't had that continuous prehistoric archaeology that we see with Lundy, and it's very likely that if we look at this and we mention Denny Island again, Denny Island appears in the historical records for the first time as Dunye, D-U-N-Y-E. A dun is a location or a raised area or a location, dun, black isle, Dunye, Black Island. That's a different way of looking at it. Ye could directly relate to Black Island, or it could be dun as location, as in Dublin, dun, D-U-N. Now, it's mentioned in a charter, and it was once part of England. in 1373. And it could also another way of looking at the name, if you don't go with the Danish link with the name and you go with the Old English link, which would have Danish words in it anyway, could basically mean it could mean, because there's different things here, island shaped like a down, or as in bream down, a raised area, dun. That could be another way of looking at it. It is protected. You can't go out there and do whatever you want. But it is actually still classed as common land. And I think even though I don't have any way of saying that there's any prehistoric evidence on there, I'm going to say there is. Because if we look at another image, and you can imagine that you can get out there you can basically, if you've got a rubber dinghy and you want to sort of get out there quickly and then get onto the rocks and have a quick look and then get back in the rubber dinghy at very low tide and just go back over the Portishead. But usually you have to get the permission from the harbour keeper at Portishead to send a boat out here. So all that complicated stuff. The reason why I'm saying I believe that there's really well intact prehistoric archaeology there is because it's only been used for grazing, and we know, even though we first mentioned it in 1373, we don't know of any buildings or anything on there. And if there is anything there, it would be very, 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 very old. And that would be intact archaeology from the prehistoric period, maybe going way, way back. And remember, folks, Denny Island would have been the last rock in the Bristol Channel to be environed, which means to be surrounded by water. So people would have been kept using this probably as late, being able to access it maybe as late as probably 6,500 years ago, being able to still walk out here, maybe 6,000 years ago. And then the island would be isolated. And then, interesting enough, I'm going to point this out. Maybe when it becomes surrounded by water, it was probably about an acre in size. People would have soon realized that it wasn't big enough to support anything. And they would have just deserted the island. And if that's the case, it would have been deserted roughly maybe about 5,000 years ago. And maybe nothing has happened on the island for 5,000 years. If that means the archaeology on the island would be intact, untouched, unexcavated, it's like there's very little untouched archaeology out there. And this is a location where you would find it, because you can't go metal detecting out there or anything. I don't think and because it's an area of, it's an area, I think, of special scientific interest. I'm not exactly sure about. I need to look that one up. But I know it's protected. I know it is. There's some level of protection on it. So it's very interesting. That I think that's a place that
similar to Sully Island.
It's similar to Sully Island, but Sully Island's been excavated and metal detected. It's similar to Sully Island. There it is. It very is. But Pete, you're dead right there.
And I would imagine they're both triple SI sites.
Yeah. I'm trying to think about this one, Pete. It basically says the island was subject to an unsuccessful appeal under Section 6 of the Countryside and Rights of Way Act against it appearing on a map of registered common land. I'm just, doesn't actually say, but I would say there's some level of protection. You can't go out there and just do whatever you like, basically. So anyway, so the last one. So again, that's a very interesting one, an intriguing one, that Denny Island there. There's the Black Rock. So there we go. What I'd like to do next is Coldy Island. There's our Coldy Island. It's still inhabited by monks, and there's a small group of people living on the island. And this is where we're going to go now. Just a little look at Coldy Island. There's one piece of archaeology I want to mention on Coldy Island called Nana's Cave. Then we'll call it a day. Probably finishing earlier than most weeks, but then again, we've had no problems and everything's gone fine, so that's understandable. And you guys have been wonderful this week. No interferences, other than legitimate ones from Margaret and Peter. No, Margaret's not with us. So yeah, Sandra would have loved these today. And again, that's giving you an idea of an island. An island itself. Now, this is very different from Lundy. Right, and we've shown you where it is. No, let's show you where it is. Right, where's our location of? Okay, it's that way. There. Hang on a minute. It's a little bit further out. Over there, you can just see the little green bit there on the edge. That's where it is. There it is. There. That is Coldy Island. There. On the edge of the map, across there it is. It saves me getting another map out. So that's where that is. Right, anyway, back to, we've got Nana's Cave. Nice bit of archaeology found in there, which we'll mention. And there it is. Right, sorry, I distracted myself then. The one thing, what I've basically said, if we want to put this in order, we've got very damaged prehistoric archaeology on Flatum and Steepo. I said we've got lots of prehistoric stuff on excavated in North Island of Lundy throughout the ages, and we've mentioned that, and mentioned about Denny being an area where you've got a time capsule capped and tapped and brilliant. I tell you what, if it would be, I'd love to do that. I really would be the first to undertake an excavation on Denny Island. I'd love it. Anyway, back to Coldy Island. Coldy Island itself has been continuously used all over, every single step and cranny in the monastic order on the island. And it's off the coast of Pembrokeshire. We've shown you where it is. It's 1 mile away from the coast. People, you could probably canoe out there. And it's got a historically recorded history going back 1,500 years. And we know that there's this Cistercian monastic order that's been observed on the island for about 800 years or so. So the monks themselves, and then what we then have is that we've got a Benedictine order being involved on the island since I think the beginning of the 1900s. Anyway, what we do find is that and I just what we do find, I'll get my notes, is you've got a diverse wildlife, and the island itself could be associated with an early saint, Saint Pia, or Saint Bia. And this Bia is associated with the earliest saint. But again, we're going into the early medieval period where I don't want to go. But I will say that there are 3 caves on Coldy Island. And the 3 caves have been discovered on the island and excavated to unearth archaeological finds. Nana's Cave, which was just going to mention, as in Nana. There's a cave known as Potter's Cave, which was excavated in the 1950s, and Ox Cave, which was excavated in the 1970s. Now, Nana's Cave itself was excavated in 1911. And in Nana's Cave itself, we haven't mentioned much in the way of human remains today. We mentioned the burials associated with Lundy, but not anything that was associated with Denny. And I know we've got later stuff on the likes of Steephome. Not the latest stuff on the likes of Steephome and Flatum. But maybe on Nana's Cave, there might be some very earlier evidence that was excavated in 1911 and also excavated in the 1970s. In Potter's Cave, they actually found the remains of a monk, and that was excavated in the 1950s. So what we've got within these caves, the cave evidence, we've got evidence of various tools, animals being found in them, and what we do find in regards to the likes of Potter's Cave, they've removed various finds, and it's likely that those finds go back as far as the Middle Stone Age, and I think it was Anne. She asked, "What about some really, really early stuff? What about Paleolithic evidence?" Well, you were asking about the ones that we'd already looked at. We've got evidence of late Paleolithic evidence on Coldy Island. So that would undoubtedly give evidence on Coldy Island going back at least 12,000 years. So we do have evidence on these islands going back very, very early. And this would be at the time that the ice is still about. You know, we haven't got to the 12,000 years ago where the ice is melted, and we've not got into this new period. And what we do find in, for example, the Ox Cave itself, we've got some very, very early burials going back 9,500 years ago. And what we do find naturally, when they've looked at the strontium and various isotope analysis, people had a very high diet reliant upon marine food. And then what we do find is littered throughout the caves, we've got evidence of from the Neolithic period, and even the likes of Neolithic bowls and various shells being used by the individuals in the island in the Neolithic period about 7,000 years ago. But there is one thing, it's probably likely that Coldy Island may have become an island at the same time that we're looking at Lundy Island becoming an island, but it's very likely as well that Coldy Island itself was probably easier to access than Lundy. Remember, it's only 1 mile away from the coastline today. So, you know, it's unlikely to have been very difficult to get to, unlike the other islands that we've mentioned, including Denny Island. So what I'd like to do is if we could go to Nana's Cave. There we go, Nana's Cave. It looks like a very oldie worldy cave. And you know what? If I'd have known this existed when I went to Coldy Island, oh God, I would have definitely gone over to see it, because it's full, it's free range when you go over to the island, but you're also told to make sure that you get the boat back. So you know that there's certain times to get the boat and all the rest of it from the island. So I'm going to mention Nana's Cave now, and then we'll call it a day. I think I'm getting a bit knackered now. So Nana's Cave is set high above the current sea level on the eastern coast of Coldy Island. And the cave itself, we've got evidence going back at least 10,000 years. And you could probably look over towards the Gower. And at that point, maybe about 11,000 years ago, you could probably walk from Coldy Island directly over to the Gower, and it was dry, but gradually, probably about 10,000 years ago, the water rose. With this cave itself, the Royal Commission on Ancient Historical Monuments tells us that it's a rectangular formed cave. It's only 3 meters wide, by just over 3 meters high, and it's 5 meters deep. And obviously, back in the day, there would have been a lot more in the way of cave to see, and it's been very much eroded. And within this cave, we've got archaeological evidence with a massive date range. You know, when we looked at the Gower last week, and we'll be looking at the Gower again in the near future, I mentioned that lots of the caves on the Gower have evidence all the way from very early prehistoric times, all the way through to the medieval period. And it's obviously what we do have evidence of some of the animals that are associated with these very early periods. And we mentioned just a few minutes ago that we do have, and it doesn't actually specifically say what animal remains actually in front of me, but we do have evidence of animal remains within this cave and the other 3 caves that have been excavated, Potter's Cave and Ox Cave actually on Coldy Island. So we've got really, really intriguing, interesting evidence associated with this locality and all the other islands that we've been looking at today. So what I'm going to do now, I am actually pretty knackered now. So I'm gonna call that a day, and I'm gonna see, because that's a good point to end actually. So are there any questions? And we'll crack. And I'll just give you a bit of one of those overviews again. And we've got Flatum, and we've got Steepholm, we've got Lundy. There's Coldy just coming into it, and off the map as well, you've got Denny Island. So we looked at 5 islands. I know Pete mentioned Sully Island earlier on, but that wasn't an island until about 700 years ago, and lots of other things that might be islands today have only become islands in more recent times. So that's why I've not covered them within this part of the Bristol Channel. There's a lot more islands that we could have done today. We could have looked at Grassholm, we could have looked at Skolcombe, various other islands, but they're much further out. So anyway, we'll call it a day now.
Not forget Barry Island.
Oh, don't talk about Barry Island.
It was.
Hang on, Peter, right? People come into Barry, right? Tell me that Barry Island was never an island.
It was.
I know. The thing is that I didn't do Barry Island today, Pete. Simply because it just be oh God, that would have trumped anything. And the problem is with Barry Island, we've got lots of evidence we do have evidence on Barry Island from the Mesolithic period, just a tiny bit on the headland at Friars Point. And we've got the cairns as well from the Bronze Age. But strangely enough, because of all the development on Barry Island, we've lost a lot of the very early stuff that may have existed, which is a bit of a shame. Anyway, thanks for mentioning Barry Island, Pete. Anyway, that's good.
Looking at the geology of that Nana's Cave,
yeah.
If you look at that, see the upthrust of the Earth's crust.
Yes.
Of those what would have been horizontal layers of the limestone layers, and now they're virtually vertical.
Yes.
And this is seen on Flatum, Steepholm, and Breen Head. This upthrust of the Earth's layers,
with a very ancient Carboniferous limestone, which is again, 350 million years ago, Pete. Yeah, that's very, very right. And obviously, it's within those. There's 2 points there, isn't there, Pete? Within that type of geology, you do get caves being created from water, and also with that geology as well. This is where you see the valuable veins with the valuable minerals that Pete has been mentioning earlier on. It's easier to work those veins, isn't it, Pete? Because they're in front of you rather than working into the layers. So yeah. And you get better minerals being formed that way.
And that's a very good illustration of the Earth's crusts being pushed up.
No, that is a very good one, Pete. I completely agree with you on that one. It is. I'm just going to see if there's. Hang on. Just see if we've got anything else there. Just wanted to show the one Nana's Cave, Coldy Island. I'm just going to see if we've got any artifacts. Okay. Oh, actually, hang on a minute. We could do a little bit about Potter's Cave there a minute. It'd be nice to. Right. Okay. Oh, that's one you can't really read. And it's talking about. We want to go on that Nana's Cave. It's talking about finds being made in Upper Paleolithic and Mesolithic finds, flakes and scrapers, Neolithic, Bronze Age. And if we go back there, we go to Potter's Cave. And this is that one there, Potter's Cave, scheduled monument in off Tenby. There we go. There's its location, and there it is. And if hang on, oh God, stop there. Oh my God, I got problems with my screen. Okay, good. There we go. It goes. The monument consists of a cave containing archaeological deposits dating to the Paleolithic period. That's Potter's Cave, not Nana's Cave. And the cave opens onto a small terrace, 20 meters above ordnance datum, sea level. The north-facing entrance to the cave is 1 meter wide, 2 meters high, halfway up a cliff face, just a bit like Nana's, really. The main cave extends 4 meters into the rock. Nana's is 5, and a smaller passage extends further 2 meters. It has been excavated, which reveals Paleolithic flint artifacts as well as Mesolithic implements, Neolithic flint, and pottery. Pottery there as well. Even belonging to this Beaker period in the Iron Age period that we mentioned. The monument is of national importance for its potential to enrich our knowledge of prehistoric settlement, ritual, and funeral practice. Now you spoilt it. It retains significant archaeological potential and obviously much more to learn from it. With a strong probability of the presence of associated archaeological features and deposits, as I feel would be found on Denny Island. On that note, we're going to call that a day. Let's just get that off there. So have you got anything else you want to say, Pete, before I ask everybody else?
No, you carry on, everybody else.
Right. What about you, Pat? Anything you'd like to say?
No, thank you. It's lovely.
Thank you very much. That's good. I like lovely. What about you, Jess? She's going to probably say, "Oh, that was a wonderful lecture. You're wonderful, Carl." Go on, Jess. I've said it.
No, that was fantastic, Carl. I've had to watch a little bit on YouTube as well. My laptop's playing up again, but yeah, it was very insightful. Thank you.
Are you the one on YouTube that's called Mrs. Stalker?
No.
Right. Oh, that's Gina, isn't it? Right, Gina. Anything you'd like to say?
No, thank you. It's really good.
Thank you very much. And next week we'll be looking at Clement Reed. Oh, and I am showing you an image of Clement Reed. We've got to get him. We got to show Clement Reed. Hang on a minute. Clement Reed. Hang on, Clement Reed. And anyone joining me tomorrow night, it's 6 o'clock. If anyone wants to join tomorrow night, needs to let me know. And Clement Reed, there he is. He looks a bit like Pete, but with hair. Sorry, Pete. Right, okay, there we go. Who else have we got? What we're going to do, I know what David is like, right? I'm going to, if we ask David if he's got any news, he goes straight away. But before we do that, before I ask David, I'm gonna see what Claire said. She says, hello, can't chat football on very loud. Need to buy one sort my love life out. So if somebody can help Claire sort her love life out, then they need to. I know Pete's available. She's maintenance, Claire is Pete, but she talks about witchcraft a lot, which is not unusual because so does Rosamond and so does Jessica and so does Kathy. Right, so David, anything you want to ask tonight?
No, thank you. Very good.
Okay, David, if you're going to go now, we'll all say goodbye.
Yeah. Bye-bye.
All right, Dennis.
Bye-bye.
Bye, David.
Bye, David.
Bye-bye, David. Bye-bye.
You
Right,
know.
see you, Dave. Love you lots. Bye.
Bye.
See you, Dave. See you. Who have I got to do now? See you, Dave. So I've done Drina, haven't I? Yeah.
Yes.
Anne?
No, I've nothing to ask. I asked a question before, but no, that was very interesting. As always.
Thank you. Everybody
No,
dropped.
nothing about. No, I've never even heard of these islands, so it's really wonderful to find out something about your own country. Something near at hand.
And they're not far
I've
away.
heard of London, but that's the only one I've heard of.
They're not really far away from you, really.
My geography's pretty hopeless.
Yeah, it's true.
It was interesting.
Anyway, so Anne, Pat's done, Pete's done, Drina's done. The last one, but last but not least, we're gonna ask if Andy's got anything he wants to say, and then we'll call it a night.
I've only got one curious question as to why some of them are called homes. Because
Yes.
I was
Scandinavian.
Yeah, but I was looking at the definition of that, and it kind of like
It's an estuary island.
Small estuary island that gets washed over by the tide, and they don't look like ones that get washed over by the tide. We have one in our estuary, and that doesn't get washed over by the tide. little bit of exaggeration, perhaps. But
yeah, no, well, Grass Home, Home Island,
yeah,
Stokeholm, Steep Home, Flat Home.
yeah.
Well, as far as I know, unless you've got a tsunami wave, you're not going to be able to wash over Steep Home.
No.
And I've been on Flat Home a few times when the weather's been really bad, and I can't remember the tide smashing going over the island. Have you, Pete?
No, never. No.
And when they were given those names, the tide wasn't really much higher.
As far as we knew, it was just an estuary island.
Yeah.
The washed over bit, I've never heard of before.
No, but that was just, it was in the definition when I was looking it up.
Oh, right.
Because I thought, what is a home? And it said, like, yeah, often in a river, like again, and a small flat island in the river that gets washed over floods. And I thought, well, none of them.
You can't call Steep Home a flat island.
No, I think possibly that definition's wrong.
Yeah.
Because all the ones
Slightly,
I can think of are well established. Small islands close to the coast, it says as well. So.
Yep. Well, within an estuary.
Yeah, it could be. Yeah, I'll go with that. Thank you.
I'm glad you do, Andy. That's good. So if nobody's got anything else to say, actually we're finishing earlier tonight, even though we're still over. It's 9:41. So I'm gonna say good night to Andy and Pat, Pete, and Gina. If nobody else has got anything to say, look forward to seeing you all next week. Clement Reed. If anyone wants to join us tomorrow night for our look at the sense of space and lines and things that go bump in the night, and tomorrow night we're going to be looking. What are we looking at tomorrow night? I do know what we're looking at because I told you earlier on. We're going to be looking at how crosses and the endless line is perpetual in that type of art, and that's what we're going to be doing tomorrow. So if anyone wants to be joining that, then you need to stay on and have a quick chat. If not, I'm going to say good night to everybody. I'll see you all next week Tuesday.
Okay. Good night. Good night, everyone.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night. Good night, Carl.
And Gina and Anne and stuff, and everybody's gone. Even Drina. There's no one left. So anyway, thanks everybody for watching us on YouTube. I'm a bit knackered now. I am really, really knackered. And S Wood, thank you very much for joining us. Comments welcome as ever. I'll see you next week. We're here tomorrow at 6, and I haven't got that other guy who's been joining us recently a lot. Anyway, not a problem. And anyone in that person interested in the Brazilian stuff, we do look at Brazil occasionally. We've got some Brazil videos out there, and I tell you what, I'll put the I'll see if I can get my Brazilian one. I'll put that video up there for you, person who wants Brazil video, and then we're going to call it a day. So if I got my Brazil video. Have I typed in Brazil with an S? No. If I type in Amazon. Oh, yeah, here we go. But I've got 2 videos on that, so I'm going to share these for you. So we'll grab that link there. So I got 2 videos on Amazon Brazil. And there we go. So we've got one there. So we've got one. And that's one on the Amazon, and then the other one on the Amazon as well. If we go back, and I'm gonna take a lie down after this now. So we've got the other one on the Amazon. I'm just bickering now. And S Wood, nice to have you around again. We'll hopefully see you next week. We'll have to do the Pete and Andy show. Appreciate everybody's support. It's great, it's been really, reception was a bit bad last week. Not on the Tuesday night. I did have problems. I don't know. It might be a network thing. And you know what? I keep typing this thing in and I just keep making the same mistake. Oh, right, here we go. So I've got 2 videos on the Amazon, and if you want to watch these, just do your heart's delight. Love it. And so here we go. Copy. And I'm just going to double check that that is working. Yeah, that's fine. And Brazil videos. Those are Brazil videos of mine. Or how do you copy? How do you copy this in now? So if I do that, doesn't it? So if I do thunder sparks, if I do that there, I think that's right, isn't it? So if I do, oh, there we go, thunder sparks. Bingo. Right, I'm off now. I've thanks for everybody joining us today. Thank you very much. No. Like, subscribe, and